The Razer DeathAdder V3 Pro is simply put one of the best mice ever made. Its feature set of flawlessly performing wireless at 63 grams is impressive along with the rest of the mouse. From its snappy optical clicks to its buttery smooth feet, and of course its flawless build quality, everything about it is premium in a way that nothing else really is. Its large size and asymmetric curves will fill out your hand quite comfortably, providing a lot of support and stability while encouraging a tilted style of grip. It is not going to feel like a traditional DeathAdder. The changes made to the original shape are too great. Instead, it's modeled after Zowie's EC line of mice, but with some key changes to make the shape more universal, which I feel elevates it over these classic designs. So when you combine killer internals, premium quality, and a great shape, you get a truly complete product that stands out as one of the best of the best. Razer has been stepping it up lately, so I want to cover this mouse in detail to help you figure out if it's going to be suitable for you personally, because with a mouse this pricey, you have to be sure. First up, we have this crazy good feature set. The star of the show is of course Razer's wireless implementation. This sensor is built different. Motion sync makes it incredibly smooth. The difference is of course marginal. All modern gaming sensors are going to perform perfectly, but it is noticeably better than others, which is rare, especially for a wireless mouse, so it's worth mentioning. This performance comes at a very low weight too. 63 grams is crazy for a mouse this big. It feels way lighter than that in hand, and it is perfectly balanced, so it feels amazing. Plus, the battery life is actually pretty decent as well. It's not quite as good as Logitech, you're not going to get a month plus on a single charge, but it is actually noticeably better than the Viper V2 Pro, so you're never going to have to charge it more than once a week. Next up, main clicks are incredibly premium. These optical switches have gotten so good. Actuation is very quick, so the buttons feel quite snappy and responsive. And the pre and post travel is well tensioned, which helps to introduce some bounciness that greatly improves the actual click feeling in game. I should note though that they are fairly overall stiff feeling. They're not actually that hard to press in. Again, the actuation is very quick, but it is stiff enough to give them a very deliberate feel, which I enjoy personally. I never accidentally click with this mouse, and I feel very precise with my timing. They are great. Overall though, they're not quite as good as they were on the Viper V2 Pro. On this mouse, the buttons feel a little bit tighter, I would say. Not actually stiffer to press down, just more evenly tensioned throughout the travel. Still though, the DeathAdder has the best of the best clicks for me personally. The difference here is super marginal, and they're still the number 2 buttons for me, second to only the Viper V2 Pro. The side buttons as well are also similarly well implemented. There's no mush, no rattle, and a satisfying amount of tactility. They are just the perfect side button. When you combine this with their large and very easy to press design, you get the best side buttons in the business. Only Final Mouse has anything on these in my opinion. Next, these feet are also top of the line as far as stock options go. They are buttery smooth on a very wide variety of pads. That is what makes them shine. No surface I've tested has felt bad at these skates, which is something that you can't usually say about other stock options. These are uniquely versatile. They will actually remove some of the texture on rough pads, so you might still prefer aftermarket options if you are someone who likes the feedback of hybrid surfaces like the Hyun here. But these are still as good as stock options get. I am not even considering replacing them. One part the DeathAdder has improved on over the Viper Pro is the scroll wheel. Its tensioning is lighter and the action is smoother, which helps the wheel to feel a little bit more refined and more satisfying to use during browsing. Plus, the wheel itself is actually much larger, which makes each step quite chunky, something that I always personally enjoy. These improvements together help to give the wheel a great balance of tactility and smoothness, where it won't feel as harsh as the optical encoders found on something like Vaximice, but it's not overly smooth that you lose the defined steps. I still personally prefer the harsh optical wheels since I am a tactility fiend, but I know those get a lot of flack in the community, so this should be more broadly appealing. The single part I don't enjoy that much about the DeathAdder is the finish. It does use the raw plastic outer shell found on other Razer mice. This will feel pretty similar to PPT plastic keycaps, just a little bit more chalky. In use, I don't actually feel this negatively impacting my experience. Rubberized coatings like what you find on Logitech and Zowie mice are stickier, which can create a more solid grip. But the new generation Razer finishes aren't bad honestly. Even though I have quite sweaty hands, I get no unwanted finger movement. My grip feels stable even when it gets hot and sweaty. I would still prefer if this mouse had a rubberized coating since these do always feel more premium than raw plastic, but again, in use it works perfectly fine, so there's no real issue here. Then to round it all off with another high note, this mouse's build quality is insane. It feels incredibly solid in hand. There's no creaking, no flexing, not even any seams in the shell or quality concerns to speak of. It is just perfect along with the rest of the mouse. Razer really outdid themselves with their new Pro line here. These mice has everything that you could possibly want. Lightweight, wireless, perfect build, great buttons, good scroll, perfect feet. It is the most complete product out there. So the biggest and really only thing that could turn you off of it is if the shape isn't for you. I do think that most people who enjoy big ergos shouldn't have any issue here, since this is such a great take on the formula that I also think it'll do well to convert other ambi fans. But there is still always some risk when it comes to trying new shapes, so I want to break down this specific shape here in detail too. Its main feature is an aggressively slanted design, where the buttons and back both slope off quite quickly, with its highest point occurring quite far to the left here. This is done to match the angle your hand makes when tilting your grip. You can even tell when plopping your hand down, it automatically rotates your entire arm. So if you are someone who likes to keep your wrist parallel to the pad, it's going to feel quite awkward. It'll almost seem like half a mouse, since it does leave the right side of your hand pretty neglected, almost like it falls off the edge here. But if you do already tilt grip, this shape is amazing. This very high profile back works its way into your hand nicely. Again, it matches the angle you create while tilted, which allows it to naturally make contact across your entire palm instead of creating any specific pressure points. And it's so tall that it makes contact very high up on your hand, without having to flatten your wrist down to meet the mouse, as you would with a lower backed option. Instead, it comes up to you to fill your palm without you even having to try. When you combine this with this prominent but not aggressive flare on the right side here that follows this natural curve on the edge of your palm as you wrap it around the back of the mouse here, and this very long top that gives your palm enough space to rest along its entire length, you get a shape that fills your hand almost completely and provides a high amount of support with minimal effort. It just happens. That's really the key here with the shape. Minimal effort is required to find a grip. Never before has a mouse seemingly conformed to how I wanted to grip it, as opposed to the other way around, and still provided this much hand support. This effortless grip is also further supported by the DeathAdder's quite flat sides. On the right here, you have this long, flat space to set your fingers. There aren't any aggressive curves, no major sloping, just a clean, almost uninterrupted surface. This gives you a lot of flexibility. You can either curl back to meet this curve and feel locked in right at the bend, or you can fully extend like I do, since this curve is so long that I have plenty of space to almost completely straighten my fingers and still get a solid grip without falling off the edge. The world is really your oyster on the right side here. Anything goes. Likewise, the thumb side also gives you plenty of options, since it is very gently sloped with no clear place to lock your thumb tip into. This allows you to create a lot of different angles. You can either come up high and hook your thumb in, or you can hold your fingertip more perpendicular to the sidewall, or come around from the back and almost flatten out your thumb like I do. Again, there are a lot of options here. However, this is probably my least favorite part about this shape, since it's almost too flexible. Personally, I like my thumb to feel very locked in on the mouse and securely placed, since I like to use it a lot for control. So more aggressive curves like those found on other ergos are a little bit better here. But after using this mouse for weeks, I have adjusted to this flatter placement, so it's not the end of the world. And I do think that this is a worthy trade-off to make the shape a little bit more universal. It's just not optimal for my own personal tastes. Now, how the shape stacks up to other ergos is quite interesting, and in my opinion, it beats out the rest of the pack quite easily. As you may know, the V3 is shaped a little bit different than the OG DeathAdder. Instead of flaring out at the front, the sides are much flatter and straighter. The top is also more slanted, with its highest point occurring further over to the left. And the rear area is just slightly higher profile. These changes all combine together to make this mouse feel more like a Zowie EC series in hand. More specifically, it's like a higher profile and flatter EC2 rather than a true DeathAdder. In hand, these two mice, the DeathAdder V3 and EC2, feel quite similar, just with the DeathAdder seeming to be sized up a little bit. All the proportions are roughly the same, it's just longer, wider, and higher, which will all combine to help it fill out your hand a little bit more overall. But I should mention that it's not quite EC1 sized, more so in between the two, so EC2 users should still feel at home here. However, there are still some key differences in the shapes. Mainly, the EC2 is far more curvy. This right side hooks in faster and is more concave at the top. And the thumb slope is more radical with a very distinctive indent here, which in combination locks your fingers in and gives you that solid grip feel that I think about first when it comes to the EC2's shape. Then in comparison, the DeathAdder is far flatter. This will prevent it from locking you into a grip, so it does feel worse for mouse control for me. And of pure mechanics, the EC2 is easily better. This mouse is oddly enough a Kovacs demon personally. But this more neutral grip, combined with the larger size that allows me to further extend my fingers, makes the DeathAdder feel more comfortable, which is a fantastic boon in game. It helps the mouse to disappear into my hand and make everything feel a little bit more natural, which is hugely beneficial in in-game situations, and why I prefer the DeathAdder overall. Then of course these more aggressive curves make the EC2 a little bit less universal, so DeathAdder should be safer overall. So while the EC2 is the closest shape comparison, it's not actually the best comparison overall, since the DeathAdder is more of a modern, lightweight wireless option, and the EC2 is a boomer-centric, wired esports first mouse. So the more apples to apples comparison is to the Pulsar Xlite Wireless V2, the previous lightweight wireless ergo king. Size-wise, these two mice are just about the same. The DeathAdder is a little longer, if anything, but in hand, it's negligible. However, the shapes overall are going to feel quite different, since the Xlite takes a lot after the Vaxi Outset AX, instead of the EC series directly like the DeathAdder V3. This means that you'll see the same aggressive curves found on the EC2 that'll lock your fingers in more, but will restrict you a little bit more in return. And more importantly, the back is going to feel far more bulbous. It's wider and sticks out more in this area. This makes it so that the Xlite will start to feel a little bit more like a traditional large-mounted mouse in hand. This can actually be quite nice since it will make it easier to pinch this back area, which can give a greater amount of stability for the style compared to the thinner EC style back they have to pinch a lot more. Or you can get full palm contact without having to wrap your hand around the mouse like you would on an EC style shape. You can keep your hand very flat in comparison while still creating complete contact. But for me, as someone who neither pinches nor palms, I just used a very relaxed claw grip, this bulbous back is a little bit more restrictive and tends to impact the sides of my palms a little bit more due to this extra size here. While the EC style back feels like it slips into my hand a little bit better, which it does allow for a slightly higher range of motion. But only marginally so. The shapes do feel really similar overall, since the overall design and form factor are the same. I just like the DeathAdder a little bit more. So while the shapes definitely do have gives and takes to them, when you consider the overall quality, the DeathAdder is an objective improvement. The clicks and side buttons are miles better. It's actually shocking. Pulsar's clicks actually aren't that bad for me, just pretty mediocre. But Razer's new opticals and side buttons are best in class, so there's just no contest here. Also, you don't have to deal with holes, so the overall build has a more premium feeling. Plus, the finish actually feels more premium on the DeathAdder. This may be surprising since it's not a strong suit of this mouse, but Pulsar's halfway rubberized somewhat coating is just not great. So the straight plastic feels a little bit better to me personally. Then finally, the cherry on top is the wireless performance. The Xlite still of course performs perfectly, it is a modern gaming mouse, but Razer is again best in class here. It's just too smooth to go away from. So overall, the DeathAdder is just a little bit better in every single way. However, when you start to consider price, things get a little bit different. All things considered, the Xlite feels very similar to the DeathAdder. I would say it's about 90% of the way there. Only the smaller details really need work. All the important stuff, Pulsar nailed. Yet, the Xlite is half the price. Literally half. So if you care about value at all, just get the Xlite V2. It is 90% of the way there, and you really won't even know what you're missing until you've tried the DeathAdder. It is perfectly fine. The DeathAdder V3 Pro should only exist as the ultra premium ergo offering for those who only want the best of the best. For anyone who cares about their money, like even slightly, just get an Xlite V2. You will not be disappointed. This is still my highest recommendation for an ergo, despite how good the DeathAdder V3 is. Now I want to quickly touch on my personal performance with this mouse. So far, it's been feeling great. This mouse performs very well in game, but it's still a little too early to make a definitive statement on how it stacks up to other mice, even though I've been using this for a couple weeks now. This uncertainty is largely due to that tilted grip I was talking about, changing how I use the mouse compared to flatter designs. Like on the Viper, for example, this flatter wrist position increases tension during horizontal movement, since it's generally more difficult to rotate like this than like this, which I feel helps to actually lock me in a little bit. Everything feels very deliberate and snappy now that it's under higher tension. Whereas with the DeathAdder, this slight wrist tilt eliminates a large amount of tension. It's actually surprising how much this small adjustment changes. Everything is smoother and more relaxed. Almost lazy, actually, I would describe it. I would actually describe it as almost being lazy. I have always found that this more relaxed style is just inherently more consistent, since this lower tension eliminates some of the jitters I get from nerves, so I do tend to choke a little bit less. but this hyperlax style is a large enough departure that it's always felt a bit different to use, which does make me in general less confident on ergonomic mice as opposed to ambies. Not that I actually aim worse in game, I think you could aim just about the same on any mouse really, it's instead all about the confidence difference. This different wrist angle is just too loose for me to feel locked in, which worms its way into my head and throws me off a little bit psychologically. I've always had this issue with traditional slanted ergos. That's why mice like the Outside AX, EC2, EC3, and Xlite V2 never felt mainable to me, despite how much I've enjoyed using them. They just never inspired that same level of confidence as a good flat button design. But after using the Viper V2 Pro, it's never been more clear to me that you can get used to just about anything, and confidence is almost inevitable given enough time. So what I would like to do is commit to using an ergo for at least a month and reach that point of confidence so I can finally determine whether they could be better over flat button designs for me personally. I've actually had this idea for a while now. The ergo versus ambi question is always something that I've wanted to answer, but I previously have never tried an ergo that made me want to use it long enough to get a definitive answer. They always had something I didn't like about them. Well, that is until the DeathAdder, one of two perfect mice, came along. So now that I have something I know I can commit to, I'm going to run this experiment. Just not right now though, because I have a lot of mice coming up to test. I am currently checking out the Vaxi XE Starlight 12 Pro, and I have a Pulsar X2 coming in soon. Plus, I also want to pick up an Atlantis when it comes back in stock. So right now, I can't fully commit to only using one mouse. But once new releases calm down a little bit, I'll give this mouse a good month of exclusive use, then update you guys later with my final thoughts on the ergo versus ambi questions for me personally. But until then, I hope you stick around and watch some of the other videos I have coming up. See you next time.